Greg Abbott, the head Klansman of Texas, has been trying to release the murderer Daniel Perry from prison after his conviction. Now, Greg Abbott hasn't been too keen on saying too much about his reasoning other than he didn't agree with the verdict, which is no reason for a pardon, by the way. But there's been a recent development in this case that has made it very clear that Greg Abbott cannot continue with this asinine crusade to free this murderer without confirming what everybody already knows, that this is supposed to be Greg Abbott giving his support and endorsement of a killing, a premeditated killing. Now, part of what's happened recently is that the court records surrounding the Daniel Perry murder trial have been unsealed following his conviction. And part of these unsealed records happens to be Perry's litany of anti-black racist remarks. Perry himself makes a big point of saying that he is Jewish, as if his being a religious minority means that he also can't be racist. And then he goes on to spout every anti-black racist talking point you can think of short of the N-word, but why he left that out, I don't know. Now, there's been a lot of clowns who were looking for any desperate reason they could to not have to call out the killings that Kyle Rittenhouse committed. They tried to hide behind the asinine talking point that because the shooter and his victims were all white, that means that it had nothing to do with black people. We've seen the same cop-out in the murder trial of Daniel Perry. In the now public records, we see Daniel Perry's social media posts in which he wrote things like, "Black Lives Matter is racist to white people. It is official. I am racist because I don't agree with people acting like monkeys." He also wrote, "It is official. I am a racist because I do not agree with people acting like animals at the zoo." And then he went on to write, "My parents own a 4-bedroom house and the BLM movement believes that my parents should give their house to a poor black family and pretty much live in a 1-bedroom house that they should buy with money they don't have." I know what you're thinking. Black Lives Matters has never, ever talked about white people giving up their homes and giving them to black people. Of course, those are the voices in Daniel Perry's empty head talking. But under white supremacy, these anti-black race thugs have the ability to act on their delusions because they know that there's plenty of white supremacists in positions of power like Greg Abbott who will bend and even break the law to protect these racist thugs from any sort of punishment. Perry went on to write, "Black Lives Matters is the result of victim mentality." This from a guy who's claiming that non-existent people want to take away his parents' home. He also wrote, "Yes, what happened to George Floyd is messed up, but he is no martyr. His autopsy showed he had meth and fentanyl in his system." First of all, when somebody says the word "but," that nullifies everything in the sentence that came before it. And second of all, this idiot is trafficking in the lie that George Floyd died of a drug overdose when the medical examiner's report debunked that lie 5 ways from Sunday. And in a preview of the quote-unquote legal defense that he tried and failed to use to get himself off the hook, Perry wrote, "If I were in danger, I don't care who is in my way. I am pushing them out of my way to escape. I will also repeatedly say I am in fear of my life. I will defend myself." I will also repeatedly say I am in fear of my life. Yeah, that's exactly what he tried at his trial. His online messages, though, make it clear that this was a premeditated excuse. As he saw it, it had worked for him before. Because Perry had also posted on Facebook about a so-called accident he had had when he struck a black pedestrian on Interstate 35. Quote, "They charged a cop for killing a black man. What is stopping them from prosecuting me from hitting a black man on 35 South?" So you see the mentality that he has. Perry himself said he stopped when he hit the man and reported the incident to police, who let him go. This is all according to him. He also posted that if the Confederate flag is racist, then so is the NAACP logo, BET logo, etc. This is what all the court was keeping concealed from the public until last week. This is what was kept hidden from the public until now. Do the pot-smoking trolls who still want to claim this race terrorist act of murder had nothing to do with black people, do they still want to slam their gums? This creep had a psychopathic hatred of black people for no reason, to the point that he had delusions that black people were coming to take his parents' house. This guy just decided that everything in his life that was wrong, hell, even things that hadn't gone wrong, but any bad thing he could imagine, and he has a pretty wild imagination, it's all black people's fault. What we're seeing in Texas is history repeating itself. You had a similar incident happen in New York back in the 1980s. Bernie Getz shot some black kids on a subway, not because they attacked him, but because he said they were menacing him. He felt like he was under threat. After he shot one of them, he decided to walk over to the guy and shoot him again, saying, "You don't look hurt to me." That's what happened in the 1980s in liberal New York. So what we see going on in Texas right now, it does have precedent. And it would not at all surprise me if Daniel Perry is familiar with Bernie Goetz. And is Daniel Perry racist? Of course he is. He said so himself, repeatedly. Now, obviously, just because this one Jewish man happens to be a mouth-frothing anti-black racist doesn't mean the entire Jewish community is. The problem is that we have not seen Jewish writers, politicians, or clergy strongly condemning his anti-black racism. Where is the tsunami of Jewish figures and pundits who are making it clear that this guy is in the wrong and that they vow to fight anti-black racism in their midst? That's the reason for this evening's Sunday address. We need to start a serious conversation about the anti-black racism in the Jewish community, starting with the fact that it exists. We heard nonstop about the anti-Semitism in the black community because of the rantings of one bipolar rapper who doesn't represent anyone other than himself, and when he's on his meds, his views don't even represent his own. Black people came out en masse to condemn Kanye West, and they even condemned Kyrie Irving without even knowing why. A tsunami of black people led the charge to make a nationwide ruckus over one rapper's words. And that's an important point to make. No one died because of Kanye West's words. Kanye West didn't harm anyone. No one got hurt, but the black community wanted to show zero tolerance regardless. And that's fine. My question is, why is it that now, a few months later, when the situation is reversed, you have a Jewish man who has killed someone whose only crime was showing solidarity with the black community? This guy set out with a gun, looking for a fight, and his anti-black words are made public. We're not seeing the same thing. We should be seeing a tsunami of Jewish commentators, pundits, and columnists ready to condemn this guy, the same way we saw so many black people condemning Kanye West and even Kyrie Irving. My question is, why are we not seeing them? Goldie Taylor characterized, though condemned would be a better term, young black boys as a group as believing, if not being dangerous and malignant, because they believe whatever Kanye West says? Really? She wrote that black anti-Semitism isn't rare, it's ingrained. Meanwhile, I'm looking around and going, well, where are these synagogues that are being spray painted on, vandalized, or torn up by black people? The Tree of Life synagogue shooting was not a black person. You hear about some act of anti-Semitism, some sort of anti-Semitic violence in the U.S. is not a black person. So where is this, it isn't rare? It seems quite rare. And Goldie Taylor knows exactly the kind of fire she's playing with. Of all the anti-black racist tropes, the favorite one is that black males in particular are somehow inherently mindless. Mindless rapists, mindless homophobes, mindless anti-Semites, etc. And that black boys in particular are really, really dangerous. And you better keep your eye on them because they're dangerous. Goldie Taylor herself in that very article said that she is of Jewish descent. Yet with this murder by Daniel Perry and his putrid anti-black racism, Goldie Taylor has yet to write any articles entitled "Jewish Anti-Black Racism Isn't Rare, It's Ingrained." In fact, I've struggled to find anything that she's written on this. Now, she says that she's of Jewish descent, just like Daniel Perry. She had very harsh words for the black community a few months ago. Will she now say that as a woman of Jewish descent, she has to speak to the Jewish community about their anti-black racism? Will Goldie Taylor write any articles with the subheading, "What makes Daniel Perry's anti-black racism and the murder he committed so dangerous and malignant is that there are thousands of Jewish boys who see him and his support from Fox News and Governor Abbott and believe him"? Would she say that? No. She would never, ever typify Jews with a smear like that. And neither would the white media publications that she writes for. Even after this murderer killed someone, and even after he has a whole book full of anti-black racist rhetoric that he spouted, it still wouldn't happen. Nobody would say that. All right, fine. But my question is, if it's not okay to do it to the Jewish community after Daniel Perry murders someone, then why is it okay to do it to the black community because Kanye West shoots off his mouth? After the Kanye West scandal and the Kyrie Nothing Burger, did we see young black boys or any black people at all ranting anti-Semitic remarks like Jews want to take black folks' homes? Or any of the racist trash that this Perry character was spouting? No. No black person was looking for a Jewish person to attack. But take this Perry thug. He was filled with anti-black hatred, and for what? No black person's ever done anything to him or his parents or anyone he knows. But he went and got a gun and deliberately went out looking for a black person that he could kill. It just so happened that a white man got in the way. I'd also like to know, where is Jonathan Greenblatt at? The head of the ADL? This murderer Perry is declaring himself to be Jewish, and considering that Greenblatt is head of the Anti-Defamation League, doesn't he or any of his other representatives consider it defaming that this racist murderer is calling himself Jewish? Don't they want to distance themselves from him? We heard plenty from Mr. Greenblatt just a few months ago. So why are we hearing nothing now? Will the ADL go on TV and denounce Daniel Perry, publicly denounce any and all anti-black racism in the Jewish community? Will Greenblatt himself stand up to the Ben Shapiros and the Barry Weisses and the Bill Mahrs? Will Greenblatt even admit that anti-black racism exists in the Jewish community and that it's a problem and that he's going to stand up to it? Here's one for you. Where's our buddy Ari Emanuel at? Still in hiding at last report. He can also explain why his brother worked so hard to cover up the murder of Laquan McDonald. Ari Emanuel said that silence is violence when he condemned Kanye West and Kyrie Irving. And you know what? I agree with him. The silence on the anti-black racism from certain quarters of the Jewish community has been deafening. Black people can call this out all day long, but the best rebuke of Jewish anti-black racism doesn't come from the black community. It should come from inside the Jewish community. We need to have a frank and open conversation about the race baiting and anti-black racism from people like Andrew Breitbart, Ben Shapiro, Bethany Mandel, Barry Weiss, Mark Levin, Greg Gutfeld, Bill Maher, Sarah Silverman, Michael Richards, Ike Perlmutter. None of them are bipolar rappers or suffer from any sort of mental disorder, and yet we have seen some of the most virulent anti-black racism come from those individuals. And there's been no condemnation or pushback from the same people who were calling out Kanye West and Kyrie Irving just a couple of months ago. And that's not right. And just for good measure, for the people who have been spending so much time saying, why are you concerned about Kyle Rittenhouse? Yeah, you guys see what the problem is and why it is that everybody said that you were an idiot. If a white supremacist points his gun at me, but he has lousy aim and hits a white man, or even if he kills the white man intentionally because the white man says, hey, don't point that gun, does that mean that I give the white supremacist a pass? The pot-smoking morons say that that's exactly what we should do. Meanwhile, those of us who don't live on a steady diet of cannabis and Cardi B videos understand that fighting white supremacy means we punish them for even trying to harm us. We don't give them any points off just because they hit the wrong target. See, white supremacists don't believe in waiting until someone actually attacks them to take action. They believe that if you even intend to do something against their interest, you must be punished. But that only matters if your safety is important to you, and for those cowardly fools making excuses to not act in the face of white supremacist belligerents, they don't care about safety at all, not even their own. The fools who push that, well, no black people were involved, why do we care line of crap, they're the very ones who would tell us that we need to focus on black crime and other irrelevant talking points. That's the well they draw from, because cowards don't change. They look for any excuse, however feeble, to not have to confront white supremacy. Anti-black racism is a plague and should be called out as the mental disease that it is. Most mental diseases are the result of environmental factors or biological ones. Anti-black racism, however, is the result of a total lack of morality and decency. It is the result of a refusal to be honest about the world and about oneself. That's why this mental disease gives those who have it the idea that they're funny when they're not, like a Steven Crowder or a Bill Maher. It also makes those who have it think that they're smart when they're not. Greg Abbott is trying to give this racist murderer a pardon, even in the face of this latest revelation. So why is he so gung-ho about this creep? In Texas, this is not the kind of thing that's going to bring out the vote. All you're going to have is the same predictable small handful of MAGA morons, but that's it. So obviously this isn't about Greg Abbott running for higher office and trying to find a way to rile up a base. He still has yet to even review this case, and yet he's telling everybody that he doesn't like what the verdict was, and that's good enough for him. So obviously this isn't about the law or the circumstances of the case. Why is he willing to do something that will only harm him and the Texas GOP? The mendacity of the GOP is the mendacity of the society. That's a hard reality, but it's a reality nonetheless. No, they're not the majority, but societies and movements are not carried out by the majority. They're carried out by a motivated, well-resourced, and well-organized few. And that's been the story of human history since the very beginning. Now, there's a lot of people who are pointing out that the way the GOP is going, their fall is going to be inevitable. And while that may be true, the question is, when will that be? The Confederacy was only around for 5 years, but look at how much damage they managed to do. The Germans started 2 world wars, and both of them only lasted a few years, but look at how much damage they managed to do before they were stopped. It's the movements that were damned to fail from the very beginning that wound up doing the most harm. The Republicans are reaching out to the single most insane portion of the society. They're fracturing because, as I explained so many times before, the problem with performative extremism is that once you've gone to the extreme, you've left yourself nowhere else to go. This is how closed off and siloed the white right has become after 40-plus years of hiding inside of right-wing media. In the 1980s, they were totally addicted to right-wing hate radio. And it's no coincidence that all these radio stations that carry these broadcast bigots only had right-wing radio shows. And this was the beginning of the mind rot that would come to engulf the white right. The disease would metastasize when Roger Ailes saw that the millions of racists who listened to Rush Limbaugh or Neil Bortz or whomever were large enough of a base to justify a TV network-sized budget. And that's when he went to Rupert Murdoch to get the seed money for Fox News. For 40 years, the white right has been fed a steady diet of so-called red meat. Well, what happens to a person who tries to live on a diet of nothing but red meat? They don't stay healthy for very long. They get fat, diseased, and eventually die. And that's what's happened to the white right. They've become intellectually slovenly, ideologically diseased, and are now undergoing political death. They're drowning, and now desperately doing anything to keep themselves afloat a little bit longer. Blatantly undemocratic measures like hyper-gerrymandering the voter maps or giving total control of the government over to the governors, this is meant to be a shield against the day that the voters inevitably concentrate their votes enough to take back those entire legislatures. The GOP got stomped in Michigan. They lost the legislature and the governor's mansion. 40 years now, the popular vote has been drifting away from the white right, as their policies only represent an ever-shrinking minority of the population. They have enlisted idiots like Chris Rufo and self-deluded morons like Charlie Kirk. And what have they gotten to show for all their phony outrage? All those school board meetings where they screamed and yelled. What did they get out of all that? They got stomped in the 2022 midterms, even though inflation is high and the incumbent party is not popular. 2022 should have been a slam dunk. It should have been a red tidal wave. So what went wrong? The GOP is what went wrong. All of this performative extremism has been disgusting the public. The GOP is not attracting new voters. They're instead running hard to the right and doing whatever they can to appeal to their irrational fringe, which has now become the base of their party. Well, they've pleased that handful of noisy racists and lost everyone else. So if that's the case, why haven't the Republicans been run out of town on a rail already? You see, Republicans have a big head because they realize something. They've been allowed to hold on to state legislatures regardless of the fact that they are a political minority. And when people are allowed to have something that they didn't earn and don't deserve, especially when they get to have it for a long time, they become extremely entitled. They lose touch with reality as they tell themselves that the reason people haven't organized to vote them out is because the public agrees with them. Many Republican strategists and pollsters know what the reality is, but they also know that the rich, wealthy ideologues who fund the Republican Party and who come up with this racist culture war filth don't want to hear reality. And so the grift must go on. The same incompetents who work for these wealthy white right-wing ideologues will go on pursuing their losing tactics. The white right-wingers who pay them don't care. A lot of people compare the right wing to the Taliban, and they're more right than they know. They have a lot in common with the likes of Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. Like Osama bin Laden, these rich old white men already have more money than they can spend in a lifetime, and they're absolutely obsessed with culture wars. But what do you do when you're a political and social minority who wants to change a culture that has left you behind? You use your money. and begin trying to destabilize the society as a whole. Sure, it harms people and doesn't advance anything other than a fight, but just as Osama bin Laden was in his cave while others had to go on the front lines to fight, so these rich white conservatives are in their mansions and private estates, while shills like Rufo are out front, along with their deranged crisis actors who they sent to scream in front of the cameras at school board meetings. These old rich white conservatives may enjoy the show, but they don't really care if their culture war is victorious. They just want to feel like they're in charge of something again. They demand that the public acknowledge that they have power. That's what this is all about. Psychological masturbation. Because when you've spent your entire life being pampered and had a media that you own telling you that your race means that you're the smartest, the best looking, the most important in human history, it's going to be a shock when you can no longer avoid having to hear the reality. But these entitled racists, they're not about to adjust to the facts. They instead will demand that the society adjust itself to them. But don't look for the Democrats to be of any help. If the Republicans are the front office for big business, then Democrats are the back office. They're a DC-based social club. All they care about is playing the game. That means making themselves attractive to the donor class, who are the exact same white-moneyed interests who the Republicans cater to. Democrats want to win office for one purpose, so they can leverage those offices to enrich themselves and their family members. We see Democrat after Democrat getting on these congressional committees and government regulatory boards, and they spend years tilting the laws and the regulations completely in favor of these wealthy white donors, and then when these political whores leave office, they go to work for those very same interests. They give speeches for 30 minutes somewhere for $250,000 a pop. You think these corporations and think tanks pay them that kind of money because they're just so impressed with what an unemployed politician has to say? No, everyone understands exactly what these post-presidential and post-congressional office speeches are for. They are the corporate pension. It's how these corporations pay back the politicians for having given them the national treasury when they were in office. You won't hear this kind of talk from any of the people on the white leftist media, especially not those bootlicks like Joke Reed and Jonathan putting on his Capehart. The question everyone should be asking is, why aren't Democrats cultivating candidates at the local and state level to combat the GOP? That's what the DNC is supposed to be doing. DNC stands for Democratic National Committee. But as we saw for 20 years with Pelosi and now with Hakeem Jeffries, they see themselves as only a local committee, nothing more. And by the way things are looking for Hakeem Jeffries, as I've been telling you guys for months now, they did not want him to be the head of the Democratic Party. They just wanted him there briefly, just for the optics. If he manages to hang in there by his fingertips, he may well, but they're already bringing up Dr. Leonard Jeffries and saying he actually defended Leonard Jeffries 20 years ago. See, if you're black, there is no statute of limitations on them going after you. Doesn't matter if it's the white left or the white right. But for everybody else, well, it's been too long ago. But make no mistake, the Democrats don't want Hakeem Jeffries as their leader in the House any more than they wanted Donna Brazile as DNC chairman when she had the job for a hot minute. The only thing the Democrats are thinking about is ways that they can leverage their political offices to get as much of that sweet K Street cash as they can. They are not interested in local races, so local candidates aren't interested in them. If you want to stop a well-funded, broadly organized operation like the one that these white right-wingers are trying to push, that will require a well-funded, broadly organized operation of your own. Democrats have one, but they're stuck on the horns of a dilemma. They want to challenge these GOP nutbags, but they don't want to wind up making any up-and-coming political stars who might incidentally challenge them later on. And they definitely do not want to have to come through with any tangible benefits for black people. As far as they're concerned, they're not actually here to serve black folks' interests. But my point is, even if you take the black community out of the equation, and you really can't because they can't win without us, but even so, the Democratic Party leadership is as opposed to candidates at the local level as the Republicans are. And their opposition is for pretty much the same reason. And people who are paying attention can see this. Democrats and their liberal mouthpieces on cable blame voters for being apathetic, but these are the same voters who just 5 months ago mobilized and turned the red wave into a red ripple. Why are they turning out for national races but not for local ones? Because Democrats have conditioned them to only think federal races matter. Because those are the only races of interest to the DNC and their white liberal media counterparts. But there's also another reason for this voter apathy. Voting for Democrats has not translated into any changes in the lives of the people who voted for them. Housing costs are going up without any pushback from Democratic lawmakers. Worker pay has remained stagnant. Hard-working black voters are assaulted on every front. And no matter how much they vote Democrat, when these Democrats get into office, the only thing we hear is how they can't do anything for us. Make a Democrat president, and they say they can't do anything because they don't have control of the Congress. Give the Democrats control of the Congress, and Democrats say they can't do anything because they need more seats in Congress. Voters give the Democrats more seats in Congress, and they blame Republicans, claiming that they can't overcome the filibuster, or they have some rogue members like Senators Manchin and Sinema. It just never stops. It's just one never-ending parade of excuses. No measures are ever put in place to help black people. Though black voters do notice that Congress continues to redistribute the nation's wealth to the 1% who these federal phonies play golf with and get campaign contributions from, the very rich plutocrats who created the poverty and lack of opportunities that the voters have to fight against every single day, Democrats don't give the rich excuses, even the ones who fund these culture wars. They give the rich results, at the expense of the very black voters who put Democrats in office in the first place. And when black voters see this pattern play itself out enough times, they begin to understand that the Democrats are lying, trying to trap black voters on a treadmill to nowhere. So black voters stop playing the game. Democrats must first of all put resources into capturing local offices. That means they have to start going into these communities and finding people who are capable and fit to hold office and who are dedicated to the same priorities as the black voters. Then the Democrats have to fund those candidates, or at the very least, take an active role in getting these candidates' faces in front of people so that voters know who they are. The people who will challenge the GOP's local lunatics are the same people who the Democrats threw overboard 30 years ago. The same people the Democrats allowed their rich donors to impoverish and to keep on starvation wages. So it's stupid for Joke Reed and Claire McCaskill to ask why they're not running for office. They can't. The Democrats help preside over the largest redistribution of wealth in human history, from the poor to the already super wealthy. And those same working poor who MSNBC whines about being apathetic and not running for office, they're the very ones who the Democrats help to impoverish and make into a permanent underclass. The problem is Democrats are trying to figure out how to get something for nothing. They want votes for nothing, and they want people to fight their political enemies at the grassroots with nothing. As was seen in Michigan, Democrats could sweep the GOP out of power in these states overnight. But they want someone else to pony up the money for it, and they also want whoever runs for office to not challenge the corruption of the DC-based social club. They want campaign donations for themselves, patronage jobs for their kids and family members, and high-paying do-nothing corporate consulting money after they leave office. That's the grift. That's what the Democratic Party leadership is truly about. None of them is running to stop the book bans or the attacks on local municipalities, because if you look at so-called blue states, you see that their state legislatures also have a long history of allowing corporations to bypass local regulations by putting state laws in place that prevent cities from governing themselves. Democrats have been as complicit as Republicans in putting a straitjacket on local leaders. Why does your city not have the ability to create its own high-speed internet system? Because both political parties took money from the telecommunications cartel to enact legislation at the state level to override municipalities' ability to do that. And the Democrats didn't support that legislation because of principle. They did it because of cash. These communications companies did not want any sort of competition. They wanted to maintain their monopoly, so they paid these state legislatures to override all of these cities and municipalities to make it where they can't do anything. The corporations paid, and the Democrats obeyed. Corporations have paid handsomely to make sure that city councils and county commissions have no real authority to do anything that might challenge their interests. From utilities to housing, corporations used to pay off local officials, but they realized it would be a lot easier and cheaper to just go down to the state capitol and pay off the entire state legislature instead. And so they did, both Republican and Democratic legislatures. So it was inevitable that we would see this statewide domineering of the cities take the next step to what we're seeing in Florida. In a lot of ways, the fascist garbage moron DeSantis is doing is simply a louder, more vulgar version of the same top-down legislative control that Democrats have long taken part in enabling. The Democrats have been as complicit as the Republicans, and now they complain that voters need to overlook that, without Democrats having to come up with the confession. People at the local level who the Democrats abandoned and left for dead, the working poor who Democrats helped send their jobs overseas, and Democrats helped make sure their municipalities had no authority to help their own citizens, Democrats who handed the money the working poor generate over to the wealthy, Democrats who simply twiddle their thumbs while their would-be constituents are forced into foreclosure on their homes and have to move around from place to place because housing costs are outrageously high and places to find housing are outrageously low. The Democrats preside over all of this, and then have the nerve to say, vote for us. Okay, and if the people who the Democrats help to impoverish do manage to scrounge up the money, the candidates, and the will to vote, what are they supposed to vote for? What will the Democratic policy platform be? So far, the Democrats' entire sales pitch is, we're not the Republicans. It's not enough to simply say you're against the book bannings and the other fascistic moves the GOP is making. At some point, you have to say what you're for. And with the Democrats, they have refused to say they're in favor of what their own constituents are for. There's a giant disconnect between the Democrats and the base, and it's no accident. Democrats want votes, they want power. For nothing. That's why they like pointing at the Republicans so they can tell the voters, don't demand that we do anything about your poverty or homelessness or total lack of opportunities. The Republicans are on a rampage. You just have to vote for us. The Republicans are too dangerous to leave in office. You can't afford to demand that we do anything for you. Why, look at how crazy the GOP has become. You don't have a choice. You just got to vote. It's too dangerous for you not to. At no point do the Democrats say what they're going to do about all of this. You just see hand-wringing and tisk-tisking from the Democrats over the Republicans, but none of them's actually saying what they intend to do to roll back all this creeping fascism. That's why I point out what a farce it would be to make Gavin Newsom president. When he was mayor of San Francisco, his priority was equal access to marriage licenses, not equal access to housing. He wanted to lower the cost of abortions, not the cost of rent. He presided over the largest single increase in home prices in America and watched as the cities in his state emptied out. You want to know why so many Californians have fled the state? Because people like Gavin Newsom did nothing while wealthy real estate interests were allowed to make housing into just another speculative commodity. He presided over that. And while Californians were being put out in the streets, a disproportionate number of them black, while people were leaving California because the cost of living there had become impossible, meanwhile Gavin Newsom was having fancy dinners at the French Laundry. If he really wanted to be president, then he needs to show that he can bring housing prices down and stop the madness that's seeing Californians flee to other states. The nation is seeing the same real estate insanity that made California unlivable spread like cancer. But then again, Newsom depends on those same destructive rich real estate interests for his own campaign donations. Who do you think he was having dinner with at the French Laundry? Do you think he was dining out with the people who got kicked out on the streets, or who were forced to leave the state while he did nothing about it? Was it the people whose lives and neighborhoods have been destroyed while he allowed the rich and powerful to take everything they had? These were not some sort of natural economic or political forces that did this. This was deliberate, intentional policies Newsom was a part of. And nobody's calling him out on it because the people who are supposed to be doing that are beholden to the exact same wealthy white interests. So that's why the GOP is going full racist right now, whether it be protecting a murderer like Daniel Perry or not fighting the Republicans in other states. Far as the GOP is concerned, why shouldn't the inmates be running the asylum? Nobody else is. Good evening, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Daniel Bryson, Codified Trucking, Stay Positive, Andrew Lewis, and Cynthia Green. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.